Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this CSIS online event, where we will be discussing how to advance gender equality in the Northern Triangle countries of El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. My name is Romina Bandura. I'm a senior fellow here at the Project on Prosperity and Development at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, and I have the pleasure to be your moderator today. Before I introduce our distinguished speakers, I'd like to go over the logistics of this event. Today's event will last about 90 minutes, and there is English and Spanish simultaneous interpretation. You can select the channel at the bottom of the Zoom app, and we were having a very packed and dynamic agenda. First, we're going to be hearing from the leadership of USAID. Then we will be streaming a fantastic video of the MujerProspera program. We will then continue the event with a moderated discussion. And finally, we'll hear a video testimonial from organizations that are working daily to advance gender equality in the Northern Triangle. So let me now turn to Ms. Jamila Bigio. Ms. Bigio serves as Senior Coordinator for Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment in the Office of the Administrator of USAID. Ms. Bigio has a distinguished career in gender issues. She served as Senior Fellow on Women and Foreign Policy at the Council on Foreign Relations. She was also the Director for Human Rights and Gender on the White House National Security Council. And Ms. Bigio worked at the U.S. State Department and United Nations. Ms. Bigio, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Romina, for that kind introduction, and to CSIS for hosting today's event. I am thrilled to serve as USAID's Senior Coordinator for Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment to help support the agency's work to advance gender equality all around the world. We are thrilled to be with you today to share the inspiring work of the 9 organizations that we have been lucky to partner with through the MujerProspera Challenge. It's particularly timely as we are on the heels of celebrating International Women's Day and the Commission on the Status of Women at the annual gathering of gender equality leaders continues in New York this week. USAID launched the MujerProspera Challenge 2 years ago with $5.8 million to test and scale innovative solutions to advance women's economic security in El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. It was an investment inspired by the evidence that when we advance women's economic security and ensure equal opportunities, we advance economic development and prosperity for all. That's why the Biden-Harris administration has identified women's economic security globally as a priority. We issued the U.S. government's first ever strategy to support women around the world to fully and equitably contribute to and benefit from global prosperity. In regions like Northern Central America, expanding access to decent, well-paying jobs and entrepreneurship opportunities, while also improving security, including by preventing and responding to gender-based violence. These investments build communities where people feel safe and can find economic opportunities. That is why in the U.S. strategy for addressing the root causes of migration in Central America, the U.S. government committed to supporting the region in its efforts to address economic insecurity and inequality, including that faced by women, and to combat gender-based violence. The MujerProspera Challenge is one example of that support. The winning organizations brought innovative and impactful solutions to promote women's decision-making, safety, and their access to power, to resources, to fair and stable long-term income, and to labor protections in the workplace. I would like to take this opportunity to recognize the 9 organizations and their staff, as well as the project participants, women and men, children alike, who have demonstrated commitment to advance gender equality in the region. In Guatemala, there's the Justice Education Society of British Columbia, along with their partner, the Survivors Foundation. In Guatemala, there's also the partner New Sun Road and the partner Ticonel Association. In Honduras and Guatemala, we partnered with CARE. In Honduras, we also partnered with the Conduci Cafe Foundation, as well as the Grameen Foundation in association with microfinance organization ODEF Financiera. In El Salvador, the Business Foundation for Social Action, Fundemas, worked in conjunction with their sister organizations, Contrarse in Guatemala and Fundarse in Honduras. In El Salvador, we worked with Mucho Más, who worked in partnership with the Pan American Development Foundation. And finally, based in Honduras, but working in all three countries, the Zamorano Pan American Agricultural University established the Women in Agriculture Network. These organizations have spent the last 18 months testing new methodologies and solutions to promote women's economic security at all levels, ranging from working in rural Mayan communities that previously had no access to electric power, to collaborating with some of the most influential businesses in the region to promote changes to corporate gender policies. As the MujerProspera Challenge comes to a close, we are thrilled today to hear from USAID's Administrator Samantha Power and from a few of the challenge winners on the importance of these partnerships and their inspiring results. Thank you.
Well, excellent. Thank you very much, Ms. Bihio. I now have the pleasure of introducing our next speaker, who probably does not need an introduction. We're really honored to have Samantha Power, who serves as the 19th Administrator of USAID. Administrator Power leads the agency in addressing some of the world's greatest development and humanitarian challenges, including climate change, the global food crisis, global health, and rising threats to democracy and civil society. She's the first USAID administrator to serve as a member of the U.S. National Security Council. And during President Obama's administration, Administrator Power held many high-level positions, including serving as the 28th U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations. Earlier in her career, Administrator Power was a journalist. She's a Pulitzer-winning writer and professor. So, Administrator Power, thank you for taking the time to be here today. We know you are super busy, so it's an honor. Please, the floor is yours.
So much, Romina. The honor is entirely mine. Really just absolutely thrilled to be a part of an event honoring such an important program, such important women, and such leadership that is having such a profound development impact. I also want to thank, of course, Jamila for her steadfast leadership to promote gender equality and empowerment through our work at USAID. She has made a major difference at the agency and out in the world. The happy part of my day today is to have a small part in recognizing our 9 MujerProspera awardees who are here with us today. 2 years ago, feels like only yesterday, I had the pleasure of announcing the winners of this challenge, the 9 organizations we are celebrating today, whose ideas stood out among a pool of about 400 applicants. And hearing their plans, it was exciting to think about the lives that they might go on to change. Well, sure enough, now we have the results. We can see the lives that they have touched and altered because of their work. Take Belkis, a baker in Honduras. Belkis had long demonstrated enormous skill. Her banana bread was the stuff of legend in her community. But in spite of her talent and all of the rave reviews, she had a hard time growing her business with just a single portable oven to produce her treats. This made it incredibly difficult to provide enough income for herself, her mom, her 2 children to live on. Then Belkis took part in the Grameen Foundation's Resilient Life, Resilient Business course with support from MujerProspera. She learned about digital marketing. She started using social media to promote her business, and she saw her customer base grow. She got a loan to buy 2 industrial-sized ovens to meet the booming demand, And after learning through the course about the benefits of diversifying her family's income sources, she also began raising chickens and starting a backyard fish farm. With a thriving business and a commercial kitchen ready to use, she now keeps the old portable oven above the fridge as a reminder of how far she has come. That is just one story of the impact of MujerProspera. But over the course of its 2 years, the grantees of this program touched thousands of lives. All told, the MujerProspera Challenge reached nearly 12,000 participants across Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras. Some grantees, like the Grameen Foundation, provided business training and microfinance. Others provided agricultural training to help women farmers increase their yields and to link them with businesses that were ready to purchase their harvests. Some helped women enroll in advanced educational programs. Others provided survivors of gender-based violence with the legal and psychosocial support to find justice and healing after experiencing such extreme trauma. All challenged harmful gender norms and encouraged greater inclusion of women in economies and in communities. Each grantee found an innovative way to empower women to overcome the economic challenges that too often drive people to attempt the dangerous migration journey north. The majority were local organizations working to empower women in their own communities, and the financial payoff was clear. The grantees who specifically measured changes in income reported that participating women more than doubled their incomes as a result of MujerProspera programming. These 9 organizations formed 127 partnerships with private companies to accomplish their goals. Partners that provided ongoing mentorship, business training, and access to professional networks that helped MujerProspera participants succeed. Thanks to these private sector partners, MujerProspera grantees have raised more than $500,000 in follow-on funding to support their work after the USAID project concludes. MujerProspera has empowered participants to advance in their own careers. But what is so wonderful about this program is that the benefits go far beyond the women themselves. These women are building financial security for their families. They are generating more economic opportunities for their communities, and they are contributing to the building of a more stable, more prosperous, and more inclusive world for us all, where people don't have to flee their homes and make dangerous migration journeys in order to find the safety, agency, and dignity that all people deserve. Thank you again to all the MujerProspera grantees. You have inspired us, you have educated us, you have fed us in some cases, and thanks as well to everyone who played a part in advancing this vital work. So grateful to be a part of helping celebrate and recognize you.
Well, thank you very much, Administrator Power, for those inspiring words. I think now we are pretty warmed up in our program, and we're going to take some time to watch a really fantastic video on the MujerProspera program. So please, I'll ask our AV team to stream the video.
Newson Road fue seleccionado por el desafío USAID MujerProspera para empoderar a las mujeres indígenas en 10 comunidades rurales del norte de Huehuetenango y brindar asistencia técnica a mujeres en comunidades de Alta Verapaz. Nuestros objetivos principales eran fomentar oportunidades económicas y sostenibilidad para las mujeres que brindan servicios digitales a sus comunidades, a través de los centros comunitarios digitales impulsados con energía solar y conectividad a Internet.
Escúchame es un proyecto ejecutado por ODEF Financiera en asociación con ODEF ONGD y la Fundación Grameen. Este proyecto tiene el propósito de que 200 mujeres emprendedoras, además de recibir servicios financieros, puedan recibir la capacitación en vida y negocios resilientes y diálogos intrafamiliares, con el propósito de mejorar sus negocios y asegurar que estos negocios puedan tener un futuro prometedor tanto para ellas como para su familia.
Mi nombre es Regina Valiente, coordino el proyecto de producción de hongo ostra en Totonicapán con la asociación Ticonet. El proyecto lo que busca es el fortalecimiento de la producción, desarrollo de marca y comercialización del hongo ostra en Totonicapán.
Actualmente estamos trabajando en 9 módulos de producción y trabajando en el laboratorio de producción de semillas.
Somos una empresa de mujeres caficultoras que gracias a nuestra iniciativa y al apoyo del proyecto Mujer, Café y Prosperidad, nosotros hemos constituido nuestra empresa legalmente, ¿verdad? Donde nos han apoyado mucho en adquirir conocimientos en diferentes temas como ser finanzas, género, también en autoestima, liderazgo, ¿verdad? Hemos venido recibiendo una serie de capacitaciones que han sido de mucho apoyo para el fortalecimiento de nuestra empresa.
En el marco del USAID MujerProspera Challenge, la Escuela Agrícola Panamericana Zamorano creó la Red de Mujeres en el Agro, una iniciativa con el objetivo de mejorar la seguridad económica de las mujeres y promover normas, actitudes y comportamientos positivos de género en el sector agroalimentario del Triángulo Norte Centroamericano.
Este curso planeo replicarlo con todas las mujeres que están a mi cargo en la asociación y con las mujeres dentro de las comunidades.
El sector avícola es un sector que no existe un relevo generacional hacia las mujeres. Entonces me ha permitido y me ha dado las pautas cuál podría ser el camino para lograr ese relevo generacional, pero con mayor participación de la mujer.
El proyecto de Mujer Florece, que busca el empoderamiento económico de las mujeres, fue implementado por Justice Education Society y Fundación Sobrevivientes en alianza con USAID, en el cual busca mejorar las condiciones económicas de las mujeres a través de traslado de conocimientos y adquirir habilidades económicas. De esta forma pasaron 371 mujeres por lo que es la terapia grupal, que busca sanar y fortalecer su autoestima para que puedan continuar con sus proyectos de vida.
La Fundación Empresarial para la Acción Social desarrolló en el marco del Challenge Mujer Próspera el proyecto Mujeres en Acción. Mujeres en Acción tuvo por objetivo desarrollar una cultura de igualdad de oportunidades entre mujeres y hombres con perspectivas empresarial y comunitaria, que contribuye a la generación de habilidades y espacios positivos de crecimiento económico sostenibles, generación de mejores ambientes de trabajo y la reducción de la brecha digital para mejorar la competitividad empresarial y social.
Combinamos formación en tecnología con formación en derechos para el empoderamiento de las mujeres. 86 mujeres jóvenes desafiaron estereotipos y exploraron las STEM. 50 jóvenes fortalecieron su liderazgo y el ejercicio de sus derechos. 100 referentes familiares reflexionaron sobre prácticas de crianza y nuevas masculinidades. 29 jóvenes se profesionalizaron, 14 realizaron pasantías en empresas tecnológicas, 10 obtuvieron empleo. 600 personas de universidades y empresas aliadas sensibilizadas para promover espacios educativos y laborales seguros. Primera red de mentoras STEM con mujeres profesionales que son referentes para las jóvenes. Hacemos de las STEM un mundo seguro para todas.
CARI apuesta a desarrollar talleres de nuevas masculinidades, porque el hombre puede ser un aliado o un obstáculo en busca de la igualdad y la equidad de género. Entonces estos talleres de masculinidades permiten por primera vez a los hombres un espacio de conciencia, de reflexionar sobre nuestros estereotipos, que son conductas negativas y que van en contra de la justicia y la igualdad.
El proyecto Futuros Prósperos, financiados por USAID, apoyó a 250 mujeres microempresarias y emprendedoras de los departamentos de Chimaltenango y Quetzaltenango, quienes a través de procesos de asistencia técnica especializada lograron mejorar la calidad de sus productos para la generación de ingresos. Asimismo, acompañó el proceso de comercialización a través de mecanismos digitales y virtuales, con lo cual el acceso a mercado se garantizó.
So for our next segment, we're going to be having an excellent panel led by Elaine Riesman. Lainey Risman is the director of the Prospera Challenge, and she's going to be moderating this discussion and taking questions at the end. So, Lainey, I invite you to please take the floor.
Thank you very much, Romina. Thanks, everyone, for being with us today. I'm going to switch to Spanish because the panel is going to be in Spanish, but you all will have interpretation. And thanks to the interpreters and the ASL interpreters for being with us today. Para mí es un gusto introducir nuestro panel.
It's a pleasure for me to introduce our panel on Challenge MujerProspera Innovations. We will focus on the connection between women's economic security with three main topics. The first has to do with prevention and care of those who are victims of gender-based violence. The second topic has to do with the role of men and masculinities. And the third topic is on the topic of the private sector's role. I'd like to welcome our panelists. We have with us Claudia Hernandez from the Survivors Foundation in Guatemala, Edgar Medina from CARE Honduras, Ramel Fushit Hawit from Cojondu Café Foundation in Honduras, Denise McLean from the Zamorano Agricultural University, and Tomás Regalado from the Fundemas Foundation. We'll also hear from our partners and allies with some testimonial videos after this panel. I'd also like to remind you that after the panel, we'll have some time for Q&A. So I'd like to request that you please share your written, concrete questions via the link shared with you. We'll now begin with Claudia. She is a criminologist, and she founded and is currently the executive director of the Survivors Foundation in Guatemala. She has more than 17 years of experience working to further the respect and champion human rights. Her experience has focused on technical assistance and support for measures that prevent and address and care for women, children, and adolescents that are victims of violence. Welcome, Claudia. My question for you is, how does financial empowerment for women connect to gender-based violence? And what strategies or practices have you developed in order to be able to care for women that are victims of violence? Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us at this webinar. We must keep in mind that historically, women have been seen as caregivers, the ones responsible for caring for their household and child rearing. This means that women must carry that burden of the housework. And men have been assigned the role of providers. In other words, they are the ones that are responsible for ensuring the finances required for their family. This delegates women to a secondary role, and this leaves them outside of the educational system, and it also leads to them missing out on opportunities for financial development. And it also leads to violence to subdue, control, and limit women to, or exclude women for decision-making spaces, including their own life, so they don't get to choose when they can use birth control and how many kids they want to have. So many women feel that they cannot continue working or studying or start a business, allowing them to have other possible life paths, as well as have access to their own income. They don't see it as something they deserve or something they themselves made possible. Although many women are responsible for providing income for their home, they feel like it's a need and not a right they have to ensure their economic independence. Many have spouses, but unfortunately, they are generally the ones that have to do everything, caring for their kids, but also ensuring the income required for their household and family. But they don't see it as something that they are capable of, but rather a urgent need given their current situation with their family and partner. We implemented a series of strategies at our foundation and with MujerProspera. The first has to do with identifying cases of violence, because many women feel that insults and belittling is normal. They feel like screaming and physical abuse, albeit not very extreme, is normal. So they don't recognize how this violence is impacting their lives. That's the first step. And we work on this by means of therapy. And the second has to do with working on a healing process that allows us to address the situation that has been identified by means of information given on the various types of violence and how these can be identified, as well as for them to see and be conscious of their skill set and their rights, and working on improving their self-esteem, as well as helping them in a decision-making process to bring about changes in their lives. Now, this here is very important because they're the ones that must decide what they want to do with their lives. If they want to separate, if they want to stay together, if they want to negotiate with their partner or spouse. And when they feel capable of making these decisions and bringing about these life-changing decisions. And the third part has to do with technical training, which or vocational training, so that they can have access to employment or starting a business or improving a venture that they already have underway. It helps women to believe in their skills and capabilities. This is done throughout our project, and many women, when finalizing our process, say, I was already an entrepreneur. I just didn't see myself as one. Now I can do many things more, and I can use social media to spread the word about my products. I can reach more communities, and this allows me to have better income and thus a better quality of life, both for me as well as for my family. These are some of the strategies that we have implemented in our project. Thank you very much, Claudia. We are very grateful to you for sharing with us about the important work you've done with women as well as with some of their spouses. We know that gender-based violence has not only to do with survivors that are generally women, but also with the role of men in a traditionally chauvinistic society, such as the reality in many of the communities where MujerProspera's partners work. So, on the topic of masculinities, I would like to introduce you to Edgar Medina from CARE Honduras. He is an agricultural engineer that has a great depth of experience when it comes to value change, climate change, women's economic empowerment, and transforming masculinities. He has worked in the private and public sector and at CARE since 2017. Welcome, Edgar. The question I have for you is, when involving men to support women's economic empowerment, what interesting aspects or best practices or innovation have you identified when addressing masculinities, and what tasks or aspects are pending or must we improve in this approach? Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. That's a great question, Laineen. I believe we are all conscious of the important role that men have. They play a key role when it comes to gender transformation. They can be a hurdle or an ally for us when ensuring greater gender equality. This is why we speak of transformative masculinities. One of the first best practices is about creating a safe space where men feel that they can express themselves freely. They can express their fears and experiences and have some time for reflecting on their behavior, for them to be clear on the fact that this is a safe space. And it's also a confidential space where they can address these topics. Another best practice, Laning, is that this must be carried out by a man that is conscious of gender biases, that is working and committed to champion women's rights and the change that is needed to ensure women's economic empowerment. Historically, men have not been included in these when addressing these situations, and we have seen very positive results when men reflect on chauvinistic behavior, roles, and stereotypes that have been passed on throughout the generations, and that it's possible to change these stereotypes and behavior. We can change the roles within families as well as within communities. Another best practice is identifying leaders, champions that can serve as examples and role models, demonstrating that we can change our behavior, that men too can work for greater justice and equality. Some of the changes that we've identified, for example, when it comes to reducing gender-based violence, has to do with distributing housework, among others. I believe these are best practices that we have learned throughout this project. Now, what tasks are pending? I believe masculinities is something that we must address in a strategic way, not as independent workshops say, but instead for it to be something cross-cutting to the entire project and take advantage of a variety of activities. For example, when we discuss topics of climate change or others, it's important to address these topics with men from the get-go because, as I said, they can be our allies to advance the cause of justice and equality. Another pending task is working on men networks, men that want to support women's network to ensure greater justice and equality. I believe advancing the work of these men leaders to empower the voice of women is important so that together we can have a fair society. Those are the next steps that we would suggest. Thank you so much, Edgar. Edgar himself is clearly a champion. From day one, he has been supporting us throughout this process of masculinities for all of the challenges projects. As I mentioned, these 3 areas of innovation are 3 areas that we support and promote at MujerProspera to learn among our partners. And CARE has played a very important role, sharing its experience in addressing masculinities with other partners. Now I'd like to move on to another area of innovation. All our projects in the challenge work directly with the private sector, as we saw in the video, but they have different links and different kinds of intervention. In some cases, it's mentorship. In other cases, it's access to employment. And in other cases, it has to do with working within companies to adjust company policies. Today, we have 3 panelists that are going to share their perspectives and experiences with us on this topic. Let's begin with engineer Ramil Fouchet-Howitt, who is the president of the Conjunto Café Foundation that was established in the year 2013. This foundation is a nonprofit that has implemented projects that have reached 20,000 families through social protection programs, environmental programs, technical assistance, as well as IT training for coffee grower communities and producers. Ramo, thank you for joining us today. The coffee sector has been traditionally dominated by men. Conjunto Café's experience is innovative because women have taken a product and been the ones leading the way throughout the entire process, from sowing to harvesting and a final processed product, and have created their own company. Tell us about this experience working with a group of women. Tell us about what plans Conjunto Café has to continue working in this area and promoting other organizations and encouraging them to do the same. Good morning. I'm delighted to tell you about our experience. Cojondu Café
Fundación también Conducafo, liderada por mi madre prácticamente porque es la de comercialización.
led by my mother, who has been appointed ambassador for the coffee sector. I grew up accustomed to seeing women leaders given this example. 66% of Cojondu Café are men, and 55% of senior roles and middle level roles are occupied by women. So it's been wonderful to see how
las herramientas de conocimiento como los detalles de los horarios. Por ejemplo, tenemos capacitaciones
the interpreter
virtuales.
apologizes, the internet is cutting out. For example, we've had virtual training where we schedule at 6 p.m., for example, in order to not have it impact their schedule and the work that they need to do at home. We've seen how proud they are and how delighted they are because we have found that women are more responsible when it comes to managing their home budget and managing their home. It must be a mother's instinct. And men have seen this, and they have understood that a chauvinistic tradition simply doesn't work. There are many coffee growers that are women that are the owners of their coffee farm and of the entire value chain. And this has led to true success cases. I have lots of figures I could share with you, but there is one that is seen but cannot be easily quantified, and it's the satisfaction and pride that they feel when they say, I am a woman and I own a coffee farm. I am a coffee grower. This has been a fantastic change in our country. We are passionate about this, and we need to further our partnerships. This is something unstoppable. We want to see more results, and we want the word to spread, and for this to spread faster than COVID itself. We are really excited. We are delighted. And as you saw, this project is a true success. And it fills us with satisfaction to see that the next generations are seeing this example of empowered women, and for them to no longer be accustomed to seeing gender inequality. I think that in 10 years or 20 years, we will no longer be speaking of chauvinism. That will simply no longer exist. Women will be completely equal to men, and there will be no difference in people's mind. And this is made possible through coffee. Coffee is leading the way here. And that's something that brings me great joy, because coffee is our thing.
Gracias, Roman, por su perspectiva.
Thank you, Rommel, for your remarks, and thank you to your mother as well, as she was a pioneer in this topic in Central America. Now we'll hear the perspective of an academic institution in this sector, and we'll hear the words of a leader woman in the agricultural and academic sectors. Frances Denise McLean Rodriguez has been the coordinator of the team and focal point of the RED agricultural group for the Prospera, MujerProspera program in the Zamorano University. She is an environmentalist scientist, and she has also a degree in biodiversity in the University of Pisa, Italia. Since the year 2009, she's been a researcher for the Zamorano University in the socioeconomic and environmental areas, and also agro-industry, and currently in her postgraduate program. So thank you very much, Denise, for joining us, or may I say, Dr. McLean. I want to ask, how can we incentivize the agricultural industry to foster the gender topic and to promote strategies that can help us advance equality? And what are the academic efforts to really advance on the economic empowerment of women? Thank you very much, Lainin, and thank you very much for allowing us to participate in the space. We want to seize this platform to also share the experience of the Zamorano University as part of the MujerProspera Challenge. In the network, we work in the Women in Agricultural Network. We work in the MEXCOR model from the ILO among representatives of human resources, of companies and organizations of the 3 countries of the triangle of North and Central America, with the main objective of supporting these businesses to build more inclusive and more equitable, gender-speaking, models in these businesses. In this experience, we've learned that multiple initiatives can motivate the private sector to advance on gender equality. First, we seek businesses to agree on international conventions on non-discrimination and dignified compensation that have been ratified in their countries. Aside from these, they seek to comply with mandates, as we see with multinational companies that have participated in our activities. A second motivation has to do with companies seeking to accelerate their growth through women's empowerment, meaning businesses have identified that having more women employees and in better conditions can be an opportunity to increase demand for goods and services that the same businesses produce or offer. A third motivation is that businesses seek to build more diverse working teams and therefore more innovative, because research has shown that diversity in working teams is closely related to levels of innovation. And the most innovative teams can also be more productive and competitive. Aside from this, businesses are motivated to do a personal selection process that are more neutral to ensure they select the best person for each position, regardless of their gender. Lastly, a fourth and important motivation we've identified is that businesses seek to improve their relations with interest groups such as collaborators, clients, employees, as well as inhabitants of the communities where these businesses work, so that their own operations are more sustainable. All these different motivations can be integrated to future initiatives to incentivize more businesses of the private sector to prioritize the gender topic. In our work, we've also identified that some businesses are interested in investing in gender. However, they're challenged by prioritizing this topic because they also need to focus in reaching their financial goals at a short term. We've identified this as a clear opportunity for academic institutions. As investigators, universities, and study centers, we can certainly contribute to reach economic empowerment of women by creating local evidence on the economic, monetary, and non-monetary effects that prioritizing gender equality in the working space has. For example, through investigation, we could quantify the effect of integrating more women in the businesses, or the economic effects of integrating women in positions where we are currently not represented, or economic results of investing in programs of working incentives that promote equality and female participation. Currently, evidence created on these topics for the countries of the Northern Central American Triangle is quite limited, and academic local institutions can lead this role of creating this evidence. And at the same time, this evidence would shed light on all these benefits and would certainly allow us to persuade even further different stakeholders of the private sector to prioritize this topic. Thank you, Denise, for sharing this experience and also reminding us that research can carry a really important role to incentivize different stakeholders, given the fact that there are economic benefits in including and advancing on gender equality. We've talked a bit about the agricultural sector. However, we are quite interested in all sectors. So now I'd like to introduce José Tomás Regalado Papini. He is the president of Fundemas. This is an organization that groups private stakeholders in El Salvador and also works in Guatemala and Honduras. Tomás has a degree in international relations and a master's in business management. He was born in San Salvador. However, the socio-political context of the civil war of El Salvador drove him to move to the USA, where he lived for 19 years. When he was 26, he came back to El Salvador with the firm commitment to create a positive impact in his country. He works in the business world, in the agro-industry and restaurant sector, and he drives his commitment and passion for sustainability by chairing the Fundemas Foundation, entity which promotes sustainability in the business sector in El Salvador. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Tomás. So from the perspective of the social responsibility of businesses, what are the programs or incentives that can certainly contribute to economic security of women? And what, or rather, how can we incentivize further the private sector to invest in economic empowerment of women? Thank you very much, Lainey. I'd like to share a bit about the experience of our project that we've called Mujeres en Acción, which we've developed in Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador. So what we sought was to actually leverage that multiplying rate of the private business. And I want to highlight on this term, on this leveraging trait. We first focus on, well, the internal policies of the companies as well as their value chains and suppliers. The key of our project was to be able to positively impact the governance of companies and all their value chain. When I highlight governance, I refer to the why, the business strategy of the corporation. And if gender equality is included within governance, well, that's quite a game. But how can we integrate this? How can we include gender equality within the core of businesses? Well, we did this through a project we call Gender Equality Working Groups, where in all 3 countries, 91 businesses participated. This is basically an educational forum where a group of businesses learn from each other about gender equality and women's empowerment. In these gender equality working groups, different topics are covered, including theory, case analysis, all based in a program that is divided into 8 topics. Within these, for example, the ABC of gender, also the role of gender in terms of recruitment, how this topic is communicated by the businesses, professional development, gender equality in terms of compensation, and also gender-based violence. So the result of these working groups was quite impressive. First, we identified all these different biases that we have in terms of equality, and this led the businesses to further understand what are those daily behaviors that are quite disregarded and that previous speakers have mentioned. And then we later diagnosed the gaps in terms of gender equality. Then we created a short, mid, and long-term implementation route. From these 91 businesses, we accompanied 24 businesses in implementation of an action plan. So the multiplying effect that we wanted to leverage was achieved within the businesses, many times by training 100% of the collaborators of these businesses. And in other cases, we managed to work with supplier companies of these companies that we trained, led also by women, where we worked on reducing or breaching or closing these breaches or gaps, for example, in terms of soft skills, but also in terms of business management, such as, for example, human resources, accounting. So to your question, Lainey, what are the benefits that a business could identify when or could benefit from including or integrating gender equality and how can one foster or attract a company? Well, I would answer this quite simply. When we see the results of companies, of businesses that have been encouraged to do this, they feel influenced and motivated. This is basically or trickles down to talent competition. Companies that include these topics, such as women's empowerment and gender equality, have greater competition, talent competition, because they have the opportunity to work with both women and men. Some benefits that we, for example, identified has to do with business cases, for example. When one has gender equality. And what I would even highlight further is a diversification of thinking. There's more diverse decision-making processes that I would even call more creative, more innovative, and that creates more loyalty and more productivity, which results in greater profitability. So there's a successful business case. However, how can one measure this profitability? Well, by savings due to less overhead rotation, and also productivity is increased when one works in a safe space that is also representative and transparent, and that is clearly reflected by profitability of these businesses. Thank you. Thank you very much, Tomas. I think that these two topics that you've covered on savings and productivity are exactly the topics that Denise also touched upon to be able to further research and to be able to quantify and therefore encourage other businesses. So and I'd like to remind the audience that you can share your questions through the chat of this webinar. We have some questions already. We have around 15 minutes left for a Q&A. So I'll start with a question which I think is for Edgar, but I think it could also be for Claudia, as she works directly as well with the topic of masculinities. This is the following question. Men have been quite absent in terms of gender inclusion. How easy or difficult was it for men to participate? And how do you present this project so that men are more receptive towards it?
Edgar quiere responder y después si Claudia tiene otro punto.
Edgar, perhaps you would like to answer, and then maybe Claudia would like to add something. Great question. It's not easy. I'll start with that. Perhaps when we speak of masculinities, that's one initial hurdle. Men feel like this is very taboo. So I believe another lesson learned has to do with being able to discuss these topics in a very natural way with men. It's also very important to identify community leaders, the leaders of the community trusts or councils, and religious leaders as well should be involved to support us when working on this. I also think it's very important to keep in mind when creating awareness among men that we are all responsible for caring for our children and the important role that men have with their fatherly figure and being responsible in that regard. So I believe it's about creating a safe space where men can be honest with each other and be able to speak of their experiences and their fears, and above all, for them to know that there are some traditional behaviors that can and should be changed. That it's not okay to make the same mistakes generation after generation, but that we can truly change some of these. That's why we refer to champions that show that they have been able to change their behavior and serve as role models for others. It's not easy, but I believe it's important to involve the entire community when discussing these social norms and behaviors. But once we have begun the process and men have identified the changes, things become easier, but there are certainly hurdles at first. I believe a key can be to discuss these topics in a safe space. Thank you, Edgar. I believe it would be interesting to hear from Claudia, because we know that language and the way to be able to begin to address these topics at a community level is of great importance. Claudia, could you tell us a little bit more about your experience at the Justice and Education Society and the Survivors Foundation, and how we can speak of a project that has to do with women's economic empowerment that might also want to work with men? As Edgar said, it was certainly not easy at first. Originally, our plan was to work with spouses, families, and kids of the women that were going to be a part of this project. But we began to see that many people were not open to this, and they were not sharing information with us. And many people said, many of the women said, this is my space to speak. And I have my family dynamics. And they felt there was a risk of missing out on their space. So we had to change our strategy and begin to speak and coordinate directly with the municipalities and organizations that were close to some of these users. Some of these users shared the information on their children with us. And there was a very nice case of a spouse that was a part of the group therapy and the workshop on masculinities. Of course, we had to change the name. We changed it to Entrepreneurship for Men, for example, because when we refer to masculinities, they felt we were going to change what it meant to be a man for them, and that we were going to introduce some concepts that might be understood as an attack to them. So the first groups in San Marcos failed. Our first group failed. I'll be very honest with you. So we switched around our strategy and we looked for new partnerships, and we were able to strengthen the group. And that's where this couple was present for the therapy. We interviewed them at the end. The men participated in the masculinities workshop, and then we had the electricity technician training program. And when we interviewed them, they told us that their couple's dynamic changed, because now her spouse says that she needs to keep on studying so that she can continue to improve in her business. And if she has to go out to work, they arrange their schedule and he takes care of their baby so that she can go out and work and offer her products. They make joint decisions now, joint decisions for their family and as a couple. And I believe that this demonstrates that although perhaps these might be short projects, they do have a meaningful impact on people and their families. We are seeing these changes. As I say always, it's a seed that we sow that eventually grows. So that's a bit of our experience when working on new masculinities. Thank you, Claudia. There's another question that I believe is for you, and it has to do with the diversity of women beneficiaries or grantees. In the JESS project, the foundation worked with trans women and women with disabilities and indigenous women. The question is, how does the methodology need to be adjusted when acknowledging the local reality and context of the beneficiary woman? As I stated earlier, it's important to begin by identifying local organizations, because they are the ones that will have better information on the local reality. When we work with a woman with disability and men with disability, this is done in partnership with an organization that provides care to these individuals. So they provided us with interpreters as well as creating the necessary conditions to be able to apply our methodologies. When it came to trans women, we worked in coordination with the Red Trans organization, and we presented the project to them and the methodology to them. And they were able to tell us if there was anything that needed to be changed or adapted to the realities of this group. That's why it's so important to know how to listen and be flexible and creating methodologies that can adapt to these different realities and needs. But above all, it's important to identify the differences in different departments. For example, working with women along the coast is very different to working with women inland, where we also needed the support of an interpreter to facilitate understanding of some of the activities, some of the words and vocabulary used. But I believe this is one of the advantages, knowing who the best partner is, identifying the right organizations, whether it be civil society organizations or private projects or government programs, to be able to bring about this change together and working together. Thank you, Claudia. And I'd just like to do a very brief pitch for MujerProspera. We are publishing 2 learning briefs. One has to do with gender-based violence, and the other has to do with masculinities. And it will all be available on the USAID MujerProspera website. It's currently in the process of revision, but I believe in about 1 month, it will all be available on the website. Okay, we have another question here, and I believe we have about 5 minutes left. This question has to do with technology. What role do you believe technology plays when advancing gender equality in our region? And how did the challenge make the most of technological innovation to empower women economically and socially? Before handing the floor over to the 3 private sector panelists, I'd like to mention that at this panel, we only have the representatives of 5 of the 9 partner organizations. And the truth is that it's just given time constraints that we were not able to include the other 4 partners. They will be present and visible in the next video we will share. But one of these partners from Guatemala has done a great deal when it comes to innovation. The project is called New Sun Road. So I'd like to encourage that you find out more on the website. They have developed digital centers in completely remote areas of Guatemala where they're off-grid, they don't have electricity, and there is very limited state presence. I'd just like to share that with you. But circling back to the panel, I don't know if Rommel or Tomas or Denise would like to respond to this question with regard to the role of technology for empowering women. Perhaps I can tell you a little bit about our experience with our women's network. In our project, technology allowed women to connect to other women in Central America that were facing very similar situations. And this allowed us to boost empowerment and women's solidarity. We worked on a series of webinars where 14 speakers discussed their experience working on gender equality in their companies, and we were able to reach more than 3,200 participants. We also carried out a series of short virtual courses to address women's leadership, empowerment, and gender equality. And this was also available to all members of the network after the live. So these were opportunities to further delve into these topics of interest. We certainly have found that technology plays an important role in enabling these connections and developing these skills. Thank you, Denise. Tomás or Rommel, would you like to add something with regard to the role of technology? Yes. I'd like to just give you an example. We have a roving classroom. It's a truck that has water and electricity, and it opens up and it offers courses for, it's like a barista courses and coffee training, and it can go anywhere. We determine an itinerary. So depending on the day, they will be in different parts of the country, and people await the truck expectantly. It's already become famous throughout the region and country. And thanks to this roving truck, people don't need to relocate for these classes, and we can go to strategic areas or that are close to people's homes, and they can receive this training. And this has been a wonderful tool. Thank you, Rommel. Perhaps to wrap up this panel, I'd like to state that there are a few questions that have to do with project sustainability. I don't know if perhaps someone from USAID would like to speak on the topic, but perhaps from the perspective of the challenge itself, I'd like to say that from day one, we focused on technical assistance to ensure sustainability. I believe that was the second workshop, and this had to do with providing direct support to partners for fundraising, as well as to develop communications products. Tomás, I know sustainability plays an important role at Fundemas. So if any panelists would like to share their perspective on sustainability, or if someone from USAID would like to comment on it, this would be the right time to do so. Yes, Lainey, sustainability is of great importance to us. All projects that we work on must be sustainable once the project has ended. This is important to us. And as I mentioned earlier, our work has to do with creating a certain culture within companies, and oftentimes this leads to developing gender equality policies that are truly implemented. So sustainability is guaranteed not only by having a company policy, but because of the fact that we provide training and we create awareness among all members of the company. It's about creating awareness and culture. So then it means that this cannot be lost, because once the culture exists, everyone is expecting something to be done, and that if there are problems, there are ways to report on situations that arise. There are steps that can be taken so we can be consistent with this culture. So I'm proud of sustainability not depending on us, although now we can continue working on it, but it's about installed capacity at companies. They have the ability to ensure that sustainability because it's their collaborators, employees, and partners that are going to insist on continued work on the topic of gender equality.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias de nuevo.
Thank you once again. I think we are just in time to close this panel. I'd like to thank the participation of all of you and once again congratulate all 9 grantees, and I know that members of your teams are as participants today in the webinar. So I want to also acknowledge your work as well as beneficiaries of the project. Now I'll hand the floor to Romina, and we will then watch another video. I'd just like to mention that these partners have made the videos that we are also broadcasting today, which reflects their commitment and work in driving these projects in this way, seeking sustainability for their projects. So thank you, Romina. Thank you, Lainey. So now I'll speak in English.
Panelists, that was a really interesting discussion and so many different programs and initiatives to empower women. So congratulations. As Lainey mentioned, we have a video now. This video is on testimonials of the different partners of the MujerProspera Challenge.
Mi nombre es María de León. Fui una mujer víctima de violencia y ahora soy una mujer libre y feliz. Gracias a Dios me hicieron parte del proyecto. Nos dieron el proceso de ir a las charlas para nuestra autoestima, para empoderarnos. Nos enseñaron muchas cosas, nos dieron terapias.
Hola, soy María José Rufino, desarrolladora backend. En el bootcamp Muchos Más, aprendí de forma práctica a programar backend, gané confianza y seguridad en mis capacidades. Además, construimos una red de apoyo entre mujeres que ha sido esencial para mí. Aprendimos juntas sobre nuestros derechos, a creer en nosotras y a ejercer nuestro liderazgo.
Es un gran beneficio para nosotros haber participado de este gran programa. Nos ha traído una buena unión en nuestra familia, un buen apoyo y nos ha traído una gran solvencia, ¿verdad? En lo espiritual y también en lo económico a nosotros.
Pues la verdad trajo bastante paz en el hogar también, porque nos ayudó en la manera de tomar decisiones y también apartar tiempo para todo, con nuestros hijos, con nuestro hogar.
Mi nombre es Susana Gutiérrez y formo parte de las mujeres productoras de aquí de la comunidad de Pacoc. Yo le doy gracias a Dios porque ha llegado a nuestra comunidad y esperamos de que muchas mujeres se entregan a estos grupos porque es grande para nuestras vidas como mujeres. Muchas veces nos mantenemos muy encerradas, pero esto nos ha ayudado bastante a nosotras como mujeres productoras y yo le doy gracias a Dios y gracias a las personas que han traído este proyecto a nuestra comunidad.
Hola, mi nombre es Violeta Mireya Chencajbón. Soy de la comunidad de Nimla Jacob, una de las 30 comunidades beneficiadas que implementan Ni un Solo Rol. Tengo 23 años y soy estudiante de la carrera de Psicología Clínica. Uno de los objetivos de este proyecto es fomentar la participación de mujeres indígenas y brindarnos un espacio de toma de decisión, además de ser parte de procesos de formación. Durante las capacitaciones he mejorado mis habilidades en áreas administrativas, financieras y de liderazgo. Con mis compañeras hemos aprendido a trabajar en equipo para liderar adecuadamente el centro comunitario digital de nuestra comunidad. Y lo más importante es que hemos adquirido habilidades digitales y nos hemos empoderado de nuestros derechos y estamos accediendo a información que nos permite buscar mejores oportunidades.
Well, thank you everybody for participating in today's event. This concludes our program for the day. I want to thank USAID, especially Administrator Power, Ms. Jamila Biggio, also our partners at Resonance, and also obviously the great programs at MujerProspera, all our fantastic testimonials and projects that you have put forward. It was really a pleasure to have moderated this session today. And for all of you who could not attend today, we're going to be putting this video on our YouTube channel. So please tell your friends that couldn't participate today. So thank you, everybody. Have a great day. And please be at the lookout for more CSIS events. Bye-bye.
Thank you.